How's it going, my G's? It's Artifact. It's another tutorial. If you're new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe. Check out the links down below. Preset packs, Patreon, tuition, all that good, juicy stuff. Alright. Hope everyone's doing alright. I've just got a new track coming out at the end of this week. It's a collaboration. Hope you're all excited. It's going to be up on Friday. Today I'm going to teach you a little bit on how you can create some better sub patterns. Isn't that very exciting for the world? We're going to turn this basic sub loop here into something which sounds a little bit more like this. And it's going to be very, very simple for you to follow along in this tutorial. And the reason why we're doing this is because you might have a nice sub like this, which is just a sine wave, isn't it? But it sounds good, doesn't it? But, you know, go down to Berghain, listen to it. It's probably going to be all right, you know? Big, nice club, juicy, fat sound system. But in reality, you know, if you're listening on your Nokia 3310, then this is just going to be a bit better. Because of the harmonics, we've got the extra little harmonics in here. So what we're going to do, we're going to show you a nice way to add some stereo harmonics to your sub. Yeah, so it's a bit warmer, a bit wider, a bit more interesting in the mid-range. And then we're going to show you a little bit of a compositional tip that I've done to create this end pattern. So we're going to crack open Vital. We're going to start with our original sine wave here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add in a few extra juicy little details. So let's go straight from ground zero. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in another sine wave on top of this one. And it's going to be also basic shapes, as you can see here. But it's going to be 2 octaves up. What we're going to do, blend it to the first one with a bit of FM. And I've got one little LFO here, which is on 1/8, and it's a nice, to the beat, kind of fast rhythm. And we're going to be tracking all of our modulations to this. We've got a very, very tiny bit on the FM1 here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to change this mode to shepherd tone. We'll bring it all the way down to 0. And then we've got these nice extra harmonics to play with. You can see I've turned down the level quite a lot here. And again, to get a bit of extra movement, I'm just putting a little bit of this LFO on a few things, like the FM and the level, but in really small amounts. And I've also put this LFO1 onto the stereo here, so it goes a little bit wider and weirder. In time with the pattern, right? Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to filter 1, and we're going to select oscillator 2, so we're just affecting our new kind of subharmonic layer. I'm going to put on a bit of a phaser negative filter here. Makes things interestingly more interesting in the mid-range. Correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. Drive it up a bit, and a little bit of modulation again on our LFO, just on the cutoff here, sir. Beautiful. Next what we're going to do is we're going to add another filter on oscillator 2, and this I'm going to select the Comb Low-High Flange Plus. Could you believe that I selected that one? Probably not. Anyway, I'm going to put this down to about 200 Hertz, and if I turn up the mix, you see we add these resonances here. But I'm going to mix this in on my LFOs. I'm going to put it down to 0 and bring the level all the way up to 100. So we bring in this balance, and what you notice with you can't really quite see it because it's very subtle, all the modulations, but kind of there's kind of 2 modulations happening because I've got the stereo mode on, so it's moving the left and right very slightly independently from each other. That's what's creating this nice stereo image, because as you can see, I've left all the units on 1 and there's no effects on, so the only stereo information coming into the sound is through this stereo knob here. Knob. Knob. Yeah, effects. Let's go over and distort it all so we can saturate it all together nicely. Beautiful Still clean, but all that low end has been brought up nicely with the mid-range as well. Then I'm going to chuck on an EQ, and I'm just boosting the high end a little bit here. And then I'm going to add just the tiniest touch of reverb. And if I turn this all the way up, you can see I've taken out the low end, I've turned up the pre-low cut a little bit, I've turned the size and the time right down, and then we're just mixing this backwards a little bit on our LFO here. Then we're just going to blend this back in a bit. It just makes the sound a little bit larger than life, but it's not like a big room reverb or something like this. And that's basically all the effects I've got. But one last thing I've done is I've added also a little bit of white noise, just a tiny bit. Let's turn the level up slightly so it sort of stays on. It's like a kind of analog kind of background sound in our sub. So essentially what we've gone from is this kind of flat sub here into this nice harmonic sub. And now what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our sidechain for both of these subs, which is an LFO tool, just taking out the volume for the kicks. I'm going to exaggerate the stereo information. I only have a little bit in there, but I'm going to really bring it up on an EQ. So I'm just going to go to a side EQ. I'm just going to boost the hell out of the kind of all of the top end here. And I'm just going to take out the low ends because we don't want the stereo in the low end, do we? You know, cleaning that up and bringing out some of that stereo character quite drastically because there's only a little bit in there anyway, remember. So that sounds really nice and full now. And to create this more interesting kind of groove, you know, I could have just left everything on this sub-harmonic mode sub here, which is pretty cool. Even better when I turn the sidechain back on. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to sort of bounce back and forth between the kind of flat sub, which has no harmonics, and the one which does have harmonics. And so if we kind of play with them together, we have a much more groovy and interesting sub pattern where we have some just pure sine wave and some sub with harmonic, and we play with the two as a little call and response. And this is just all a sub layer for your song, and it's already going to give you a nice low end that's funky and groovy that you can really get started and get twisted with. So what I've done to create a little bit more movement is I've created one more version of my harmonic sub here, and all I've done on this one is I've just changed the speed of my LFO, made it a little bit shorter, changed the shape, and just tweaked the filters a little bit to create a slightly different kind of sounding harmonic, which you can hear here. So we have a bit of a slower kind of note here. So if we play all those three together then. In the context of our track. So that's quite nice already, and I would even be as bold as to bounce that all down as one file, and that's kind of my my sub as a whole already here. And what I could do then is, if I don't like how sort of much harmonics I've added to the sound, I could sort of just smooth those off a bit. Let's go for a little high shelf. And even if I take all those or most of those harmonics out, you know, there's still a little bit in there, of course, but now the sub is sort of, we've left a bit more space for mid-range if we want to have a mid-bass, but we've still got this kind of dynamic changing in the sub happening, and it's just a much more interesting kind of sub line. But I'm going to leave those harmonics in for now. I quite like them, and what I can then go on to do is start to add in some more sounds. But I hope you found that a little bit helpful and inspirational for your subs, and it's an easy, quick way you can get from something like quite sort of bland and although it's powerful, it's a little bit uninteresting into something a little bit more funky. Just by playing with those extra harmonic layers and sort of bouncing between them. Thanks a lot for watching. Really appreciate all of you guys. Have an absolutely awesome day. Peace.